Welcome to Andy and Ari On3, another instant reaction show. And Ari, we weren't planning on doing this one, but the way Texas A&M beat Florida, the way Florida got bullied on both lines of scrimmage again. Ari, I think the Billy Napier question is no longer a question. I think it has become a simple math problem.
Mm-hmm.
He is very expensive to fire. He is now more expensive to keep.
Yeah, we spent all week talking about what he should do at the quarterback position. I don't even think that matters right now, Andy. With the
Tom Brady wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, you watch this game, it looked like for a large portion of at least the first half that Florida didn't even have a pulse out there. Like you're talking about a team that just isn't capable in any regard at the moment. And, this is not what he promised all offseason.
Nope.
This is not what we expected from either quarterback. And it's just, this isn't the Florida team the program expects.
No, this is not what was promised all offseason. And again, if you were listening to that without a critical ear, well, shame on you. Because all you had to do was look at what left the roster and look at what came onto the roster, and you would know that it wasn't going to be that good. The problem is you have guys like Scott Strickland, the athletic director, going on Feinbaum the day before the Miami game and saying, Billy's going to be here a long time. He's methodical, and he's built a better roster. Well, if Scott Strickland believes that Billy Napier had built a better roster, he also does not need to be involved in any further decisions.
Yeah.
Because he also does not know what he's looking at. That's the thing about the Billy Napier thing, because either he was lying about building a better roster, he knew it wasn't better, and he was lying to stall for time, or he really doesn't know what he's looking at.
And you know what really occurred to me is that when Dan Mullen was at the end of his tenure, I thought he wasn't fit to be Florida's coach because he didn't understand the importance of talent accumulation. He didn't respect recruiting the way that you need to at a place like Florida or any of the other SEC programs that are expecting to win a national championship. But now when you fast forward to the Billy Napier era, you have somebody who says the right things and who went about doing things the right way, but also doesn't understand clearly, not from maybe from a lack of trying, but certainly from a lack of understanding on what this team needs to look like athletically. This isn't just about beating Texas A&M or losing to Miami. It's about the roster that's in place.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near
close to. They don't have a roster that can beat Ole Miss. They don't have a roster that can beat Texas. They sure as hell don't have a roster that can beat Georgia. They have no chance in these games because they have not built along the line of scrimmage the way you have to win in the SEC. Billy Napier was supposed to know that. He got hired because he was supposed to know that. He hires this massive staff, which it looked like Nick Saban's staff from a numbers standpoint, but it didn't act like Nick Saban's staff because it was very disorganized, because they clearly didn't have their stuff together when it came to recruiting the portal. They were really slow on evaluations. They do stupid things like the Jaden Rashada contract. I mean, that's part of his tenure too.
Yeah, and I got fooled because I thought mobilizing a large staff, saying the right things in news conferences, seemingly understanding it was such a breath of fresh air from the way that Dan Mullen approached recruiting and talent accumulation. And the fact of the matter is, Andy, it doesn't matter whether he understands it or not. He simply just can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's the long and short of it here.
That's it.
So,
unfortunately, he's incapable.
Yeah.
Like, he's, by all accounts, a very nice person. By all accounts, a good boss to work for. This sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks because I don't like it when coaches get fired, because it means there's tons. I mean, think about the size of his staff.
Yeah.
Because he's going to make a ton of money, but they don't all make a ton of money. And they're going to be asked to go find new jobs and move their families. Like, you owed it to those people.
Yeah.
And to the people paying you millions of dollars to do a better job than this.
This is a show that's, basically run on vibes. Like, we're happy all the time, but like, this stuff is serious. Like, when you take the job at Florida, you have to understand that, you might get 1 year that's underwhelming, or even 2 years that are underwhelming, but like, you can't field a team in year 3 when other coaches in your league have flipped their rosters and been successful faster. When you have a game in the rain and you're pinning your opponent on the one, and they just go all the way down the field without throwing the ball once. It's just like, show something. And like,
I would argue that Mike Elko in year 1 at Texas A&M did more to build a good line of scrimmage through the transfer portal by taking Nick Scorton alone than Billy Napier did in all of his time so far at Florida.
Yeah, and you made this good point. We're talking about it, but you can't lose your best edge rusher and your best running back and then not replace them. And it doesn't matter whether they tried or they didn't do it. And it's like, you're Florida. How do you not like? How does A&M just go get Purdue's defensive end who's going to torture people all year?
He's from Bryan.
No,
yes.
but I'm saying like you're in a position, and of course geographically, there's a lot of kids from Florida too, Andy. Like I mean, like it's like it is an unbelievable situation that you're losing two of your best players. And you're going into year three, and then you don't replace
Etienne thing's so interesting too because he was the most talented back, but he was the number 2 back.
Yeah,
and the reason, yes, he got a bag at Georgia, but the bigger reason he left is because he was going to be the number 2 back again.
Yeah,
and he's Georgia's number 1 back, and they're the best team in the country. Like, who's better at talent evaluation, Kirby Smart or Billy Napier? Well, we know the answer to that.
Yeah, no, it just this whole thing is about having something to grab onto. For the first 2 years, I thought he was going to give Florida the recruiting results in the high school ranks, not even the portal,
right?
To give people hope. And he did it to a certain extent with Lagway, but when his class fell apart last year, and then he didn't attack the portal with the fierce ruthlessness that you need to at that job. Again, I've spent so much time wondering whether he gets it or not, when I should have been wondering whether or not he's capable or not. Like that is the number one thing. So, Florida has to go out and get a person when the time comes that understands that you can flip a roster very quickly, and it might not be nice and you might hurt some people's feelings, but they didn't do it.
I see Lane Kiffin's name floating up through the chat and people saying, oh, the Florida Boosters don't want Lane. The Florida Boosters would love Lane Kiffin. They would probably, if the job opens, which I would assume it's going to, they would put together some money to try to go get Lane Kiffin. I don't know that Lane Kiffin would take that job.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's made Ole Miss a better job right now. And that's the part that is going to be frustrating because Florida keeps going. And the reason people, Billy had a lot of backers this offseason who, not necessarily because they loved what he'd done, but they didn't want to see Florida just cycle again. They think that's part of the problem. And I disagree with that. I think if you hire the right coach, it doesn't matter how many you fire.
It resolves itself immediately.
Yeah. The right coach fixes everything.
Tennessee proved that.
Exactly. Tennessee has the right coach right now. Josh Heupel was the right coach. Nobody thought he was when he got hired, but he was. And that's kind of the issue here. It's hard to hire coaches. And I know everybody's mad at Scott Strickland. All the Florida fans are mad at Scott Strickland. And I'm not going to give him a pass on this because, again, he's the one saying the night before the Miami game, Billy's going to be the coach for a long time.
And you have to be seasoned enough in that position to know what to expect.
He's made the roster better. Like, if you actually believe he's made the roster better, you don't know what you're looking at either. But they don't usually let SEC ADs make 3 head football coach hires. That's typically not what happens. Now, I know Florida working with an interim president, Kent Fox, who actually used to be the full-time president, but it's a very strange situation right now. And that's part of the thing that complicates this. I think if Ben Sass, who resigned as president in July, had stayed on as president, this already would have been done. They probably would have made a move on Strickland already, and they would probably be making a move on Napier right now.
Yeah, and we didn't know what this game was supposed to look like in order for him to, keep his job. We don't know what the timing of this is going to be. It can be tonight. It could be tomorrow. It could be in a few months, as you wrote. And I encourage you guys to check out his column on on3.com. Andy did a really good job of kind of putting that in perspective. But, the thing with Florida that you noticed right out of the gate tonight, Andy, is like, if you turned it on like 5 minutes into the game, it's like, oh boy, here we go. Like, it's it wasn't even like,
remember, Texas A&M had to start a backup quarterback.
Right.
Connor Wegman was hurt. They made it a game time decision and then ended up starting Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed made Florida defenders look stupid. Like, he made them look terrible.
And I do want to latch on a little bit to the pre-week thought of what he does with the quarterback position is going to determine whether or not he's fit for the job. I thought that was an interesting discussion coming into the week. But I think the most troubling thing about this as we watched this game is that it really doesn't matter who the quarterback is, and they have an entire roster problem, which isn't repaired by hope because your quarterback is good.
At least it solves the people who said, well, if you fire Billy, then everybody's going to leave. Okay.
Yeah,
that's kind of what you want at this point. Now, DJ Lagway might leave, but them's the breaks. Like, you're going to have to do something. And when I say it's a math problem, I've said this before, and people get mad at me, but this is the God's honest truth. And I figured this out probably very late in my career. I should have known this much earlier. But when Willie Taggart was the head coach at Florida State, and his buyout was extremely expensive for the time, I looked at how much are they going to lose in season ticket sales if they keep him? How much are they going to lose in donations if they keep him? And when it became obvious that they would lose more if they kept him then if they would have to pay him if they fired him. There is no decision to be made at that point. Your decision has been made for you. And I think that's where it is now. I was texting some people, people who have to raise money for the University of Florida. And I said, how do you raise money? And they said, we don't. They said, basically, this game offered clarity on that front.
Yeah. And, you know, in a world where fundraising isn't just nice new weight room anymore, and it comes to perpetuating the issue that we've been talking about, you have to do something. And it's just not even something. I don't know what's going to happen. You have a better idea of it than I do, but I don't know how this is even a salvageable thing, because it's not like, I don't think we're doing the, well, if they win this week or if they lose this week game anymore. It's like, it's abundant. It was clear coming into this game, but it's abundantly clear now.
Because Texas A&M, like, they got a pretty talented roster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they're going to be a great team in the SEC this year. They could be a pretty good one.
But they're head and shoulders better than Florida.
Right, exactly. And that's the problem.
2 years behind the building process, too.
Yes. Mike Elko, given 3 years, is probably going to have a much better roster than Billy Napier put on the field in year 3. Much, much better. He already has a much better, but partially thanks to Jimbo Fisher. But also, he kept it together when he got there.
You know what I've noticed a lot of on Twitter and in this chat, a little bit of like the revisionist history of Dan Mullen.
Oh, let's get into that because
it's an important thing to discuss. I'll let you cook, but I've noticed a lot of that.
Yeah, it is basically the biggest mistake Florida made was firing Dan Mullen when they did. If you say that, you weren't paying attention to Florida football in 2021. Dan Mullen, from 2018 to 2020, was an excellent coach at Florida. He was fantastic on the field. He was an okay recruiter. But you know what? Fantastic on the field, okay recruiter. You can work with that. But he came back a different coach after the 2020 season. Basically, after that bowl game against Oklahoma, where he said the 2020 Florida team finished its season 11 days ago. And then you had that rumor that clearly someone in Mullen's camp leaked to Adam Schefter saying, look for Dan Mullen of the college ranks to go for NFL head coaching jobs when no NFL teams were even looking at him. Like, he came back a different person. And what you got in that next year was a guy who's like, I don't know if I want to be in this era of college football, which is fine because everything did change that year. But that's how you get when poor David Waters asked the softball question about recruiting after the Georgia game.
Oh, boy.
Dan Mullen goes, we'll talk about recruiting when it's time to talk about recruiting. And you knew it was over.
Just so you remember this correctly, or I remember this, that was my first day back from maternity leave.
Paternity leave?
Yeah, did I say? Ask my wife.
I'm like, that's a miracle. I mean, I've seen that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Come on.
But that was the first thing I was greeted by when I woke up that morning. So, and I was like ready to roll. But like, yes. So hiring coaches is really bad. If this happens soon, we're going to talk a lot about who's a fit and whatever. But I think that the most important thing that people have to remember is, and you even made this comment during the Lane Kiffin discussion a second ago about he might have made Ole Miss into a better job. Like, I don't subscribe to that. Like, I think Florida still is unequivocally a top 6 or 7 job in America. And I think that with the right coach, you could turn Florida into Georgia. I don't think you could turn Ole Miss into Georgia, which would make the job probably a little bit more attractive for Lane Kiffin.
And we've had that hypothetical discussion. We had it a few weeks ago. And Georgia fans, don't get mad at me about this.
Yeah.
But I did throw it out there. You know, I like my alternate histories, my alternate timelines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if after Florida had fired Will Muschamp, they had tried to hire Kirby Smart? Like, would Florida be Georgia now? I think
Florida would be Georgia now.
I think they would too.
Yeah. And that's the power of hiring the right person. Now, very difficult to hire the right person and identify that person. Do you go from a smaller school? Do you go to somebody who recruited really well under Nick Saban? Like, do you go?
You've just described Billy Napier.
Yeah, no, I'm just, just
so like, I don't know if that's going to work.
But doesn't that sound perfect? Like, on paper, it's like, I don't even like feel like I could get mad or upset at an athletic director for fumbling that bag, because it makes so much sense on paper.
Strickland in this particular case is the game did change completely. And what Billy Napier planned to do, I think, would have worked great in 2011 in terms of his recruiting strategy. His on-field coaching, his talent evaluation clearly weren't up to snuff, so it wouldn't have mattered. But that part of it, he probably could have built a better roster in an era when guys couldn't transfer immediately and there was no transfer portal where he could very quickly fix the roster. He just wasn't built for this era. And, you know, it maybe wasn't built for that level either. We'll find out, because I would suspect he can go back to the level he was having success and have success.
Andy, Saw this in the chat just now. Got to throw this at you just for a little levity. Jimbo Fisher is out there and a free agent and a national champion.
Well, you know who else is out there? Nick Saban's out there.
There's another name out there that I've been seeing a lot with Florida fans too. That's out there, and
Urban Meyer.
Yeah, and I don't.
Does Urban Meyer have to get in the ring? Okay, here's the.
Do you want to do an Urban Meyer rant real quick?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's talk about Urban Meyer. Let's
I'll
explain the situation to the people with Urban. We actually talked about this with somebody at Ohio State the other day when we were up there to talk to Ryan Day. We bumped into somebody and we were talking to them, that someone very knowledgeable about the Buckeyes who was close to Urban's program, and they're like, I don't know if he could handle the players now because he didn't succeed in the NFL, and they have more power than NFL players do at this point.
Yeah, so, I mean, he ran a program a certain way, and the thing that I find interesting, and I don't know if this is 100% the reason why Nick Saban's no longer the coach at at Alabama. I don't know what Urban Meyer would do in this era, but the coaches that were elite back in 2015 are not necessarily suitable for the current structure of the sport.
There's a new
the way that Urban Meyer, from covering him at Florida, I know covering him at Ohio State. I don't know that Urban Meyer's skill set as a coach is compatible with the way you have to run your team now. So I don't know that that's even a realistic discussion. People are going to make this jump because he did coach at Florida, won 2 national championships there, and has been very successful at every college stop that he's been to. But like this is, I think that's nonsense.
So I've talked to a lot of people in Gainesville about this. Like if it happens, who's the interim coach? I think it's Dan Enos, who's on the support staff at Florida. He's a former FBS head coach, former coordinator. He would be one where you could come in and he's not taking coordinator duties away from a coordinator. But I will point this out. If this happens, I don't know if this is going to happen tonight, tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to happen next week, months from now. But I will point out that the greatest interim coach of all time is just sitting there twiddling his thumbs. He actually lives in the state of Florida right now. The greatest interim coach of all time. I'm not saying hire this person permanently. I'm saying if you make this move, bring this person in to finish the season. Ed Orgeron. Coach O is the greatest interim coach the game has ever seen.
I had no idea where you were going with that, but that would be fun. Yeah,
so funny if that happened. I don't think it will, but I'm just saying he's right there. I think he's living in Miami.
Yeah,
like, you give him. You're like, Coach O will give you $1 million. Come finish the season.
Yeah, that would be that would be something. I didn't know where you were going, and it landed in a place that is funnier than I could have ever imagined.
I am glad to provide some levity on a night when our Florida fans in the chat are not feeling very happy. And so, well, that's where they're at. Stay tuned. I've got a column up at On3. Gators Online, Nick Delatorre, Zach Albaverdi. They're going to be covering everything. Keith Niebuhr. They'll all be covering everything, all the details, the ins and outs of this. Pete Nakos has a story up on the details of Billy Napier's contract. If you're curious to see what that looks like, it could be a very interesting next few days or weeks at Florida. We will find out. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again later tonight.